Good morning. Let me put my books down there. This talk came out of a song that was playing in my head a few weeks ago. Looking for love in all the wrong places. I'm sure you've heard it before. For me, that has to do with some very painful childhood experiences that continue to rise up, sometimes take me over for a few minutes or a few hours or a few days. That song was playing because I was having a meltdown. My thoughts and feelings were being hijacked by the trauma out of my past. Luckily, I have excellent resources that help me out of my meltdowns, and the experience in the song led me to think about the places that I look for authentic love in my life. As teenagers, most of us learn all about love from our friends, right? And the top 40. What was your idea of love as an adolescent? Do you still remember? I think mine was that someone would marry me and take care of me forever. For most of us, sex comes into it at some point, and for some of us, having kids is important. Although for me as a teenager, kids were my bratty brothers and a way to make money by babysitting. At some point, we grow beyond those teenage dreams of love, hopefully. So how did that happen for you? For me, there were breakups, and then there was the confusion of the free love era that I just happened to be at the right age to be right in the middle of. For some of us, there was abuse that masqueraded as love. Do you remember Tina Turner singing, "What's Love Got to Do with It"? I'm not sure, I want to try. What's love got to do with it? I can't do Tina very well. She was one of a kind. Also, for me as a young adult, there was feminism, which had me trying to figure out how to be my own person and still have love in my life. So I'm very glad that also, as a teenager, in my late teens, I got started on a spiritual journey. It opened up a whole new path to understanding love, as I expect it did for most of us. I now see divine love as the beautiful, kind, compassionate energy that everything is made of. Love is all there is, the Beatles sang, but my mind doesn't always cooperate. Maybe yours doesn't either. I need reminders. Early in my spiritual journey, somebody introduced me to the idea of agape. They taught me it was one of the 4 kinds of love in Greek and Christian traditions. I've read since that there maybe are more than that, but I found this quote that I like, and it describes Martin Luther King's idea of agape. For Martin Luther King, the concept of agape stood at the center of both his spiritual belief in a knowable God and his assertion that love and nonviolence were essential to remedying America's race problems. He defined agape as purely spontaneous, unmotivated, groundless, and creative. It is the love of God operating in the human heart. It can be so hard to look at the painful parts of the world with a loving heart, but I think it's essential. Mary Oliver, who's a poet, some of you may know, has a quote in her poem Spring that says, "There is only one question, how to love this world." The other kind of love that's been most important to me in both the human and divine aspects of my journey is self-love. Some of us, myself included, have gotten lost in anger, sadness, addictions, expectations, work, trauma, etc., as we search for love. But it's my belief that even these can lead to love, and many spiritual teachers say that as well. Ram Dass's guru, Neem Karoli Baba, once said of a drunken man, "Can't you see? He's a great saint. You only see the outside." What does love mean to you? Where do you look for it? Where do you find it? I hope you'll share some of your answers after I'm done. For the rest of this talk, I want to share some of the places that I've learned what love means to me. I've found that the word love doesn't always have to be present for something to feel like a pathway to love. So some of these quotes, you won't even hear that word mentioned. And as I was getting ready to come this morning, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I could have chosen like 100 or 1,000 different quotes than the ones I've chosen, but you'll get what I have, and I hope that you will find, look for, look at, because I'm sure you have your own. Remind yourself of what your own are. So I've divided this part of my talk into some categories, and I just want to say when I quote a poem, I'm usually just quoting an excerpt or a couple excerpts, because for brevity's sake. So first, here's a short, incomplete list of some of the places I've found love, and it's not in any particular order. Flowers, oceans, mountains, rain, birds and birdsong, breathing, music, food, especially ice cream, spiritual teachings and practices, therapy, being creative, rocks and stones, and rest. And I brought one of my favorite rocks and stones. So that people on Zoom can see it. So amethyst, which is in many traditions is considered the connection to spirit, both the color and the stone itself. So. All right, so here's a little more from poet Mary Oliver. She has a poem called The Ponds, and this category, by the way, is called wildness. She says, "What I want in my life is to be willing to be dazzled, to cast aside the weight of facts, and maybe even to float a little above this difficult world. I want to believe I am looking into the white fire of a great mystery. I want to believe that the imperfections are nothing, that the light is everything, that it is more than the sum of each flawed blossom rising and fading. And I do." So another poet and writer, John O'Donohue. There he is. This book is called To Bless the Space Between Us, and he actually has a poem called Axioms for Wildness. And wildness can mean anything you want it to mean. I mean, for me, most of the time, it means the natural places on the earth, the beautiful places on the earth. Meet the dawn on a mountain. Wash your face in the morning dew. Feel the favor of the earth. Go out naked in the wind, your skin almost aeolian. With the music inside, dance like there is no outside. Become subtle enough to hear a tree breathe. So this next category is called Love is an Inside Job. Michael Singer, who's a writer that many of you may know, whose first book was The Untethered, or first book that I read was The Untethered Soul, and now he's followed it up with one called Living Untethered, talks about love being an inside job. When love shoots up inside of you and you say you're in love, what you really mean is that you feel love coming up from your heart and bathing you. You're floating in the ocean of love, but you're not the love you feel. You are the experiencer of the love you feel. Note that so far, we haven't considered the role of another person in this love experience. This is because what's actually happening when you begin to feel love in your heart is opening and emanating a beautiful flow of energy. This should drive you to say, I love love, but instead you say, I love you. That is your first clue into the role of another person in your experience of love. As long as the other person's presence helps your heart open, you feel love for them. If their presence stops opening your heart, you start looking elsewhere. This is why human relationships are so difficult. We project the source of love outside instead of realizing it is always inside. The actual flow of love has to do with you and your heart. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It is an energy flow coming through your heart that you experience inside. So my next category is called Finding Love in What Is. In the poem The Invitation, Araya Mountain Dreamer says, I want to know if you can see beauty even when it is not pretty every day, and if you can source your own life from its presence. Thich Nhat Hanh says, the miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth, dwelling deeply in the present moment and feeling truly alive. And Viktor Frankl, who spent some years in a concentration camp, said, everything can be taken from a person, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So I aspire to be as loving of myself as the tree is in Wendell Berry's poem, The Sycamore. In the place that is my own place, whose earth I am shaped in and must bear, there is an old tree growing, a great sycamore that is a wondrous healer of itself. Fences have been tied to it, nails driven into it, hacks and whittles cut in it. The lightning has burned it. There is no year it has flourished in that has not harmed it. It bears the gnarls of its history healed over. It has risen to a strange perfection in the warp and bending of its long growth. It has gathered all accidents into its purpose. And to bring my own words into it, in 2004, I gave a speech, and one of the things I said was, honoring the incredible journey each of us is on, doing my small part to light a path, is what keeps me going in this imperfect, conflicted world. The path toward peace, respect, and cooperation is walked with baby steps. It is lined with love. It is planted with acceptance for what is. Like I said, lots of things that to me lead me towards love, but maybe aren't the direct kind of path that we often think of. So I hope these are being meaningful to you. The next category is called Love in Silence. I have found love in silence. I meditate for 20 minutes almost every morning. And when I start, the things I'm really concerned about or distressed about or what's going to happen during the day or show up first. But if I keep going, then usually I keep coming back to my breath or a mantra. Then I begin to feel calmer. And eventually, usually, I can find some peace, which for me is really a key aspect of love. I think I almost can use love and peace interchangeably. So one more book, which is Inviting Silence by Gunilla Norris. And this is all about different aspects of silence. She says, silence brings us back to basics, to our senses, to ourselves. It locates us. Without that return, we can go so far away from our true natures that we end up quite literally beside ourselves. We live blindly and act thoughtlessly. We endanger the delicate balance which sustains our lives, our communities, and our planet. Can we remember our power as persons? Can we remind ourselves and others that nurtured in silence, our awareness can lead us back to integrity and meaning? Each of us has and is a holy capability. I think that one's especially meaningful to me because there are times when I'm having one of those meltdowns where I kind of feel like I can't be in myself. I feel like I just want to jump out of myself. I don't know if you ever felt that, but it's just like, so how can I not be beside myself, but actually here, present? Okay, so we're getting towards the end here. I want to share something that came to me in a meditation. And the first line came from a spiritual teacher of mine, and the rest of it came from a meditation. Peace in the midst of chaos, love in the midst of hate, joy in the midst of sadness, comfort in the midst of pain, beauty in the midst of ugliness, health in the midst of sickness, stillness in the midst of freneticness, quiet in the midst of noise, letting go in the midst of holding on, trust in the midst of free falling, loving arms in the midst of loneliness, guidance in the midst of confusion, connection in the midst of despair, calmness in the midst of tension, peace that passes understanding. Okay, so I got a couple short categories here. One is called people, and I just have to say I've been incredibly blessed to know so many kind and loving people who have helped me understand what love is, what true, authentic, divine, ever-present love is. And a big part of that for me is learning how to balance giving, which I love to do, and receiving, which I find hard to do, but learning how to do that and to continue to receive love as well as to be able to give love. This category is called laughter. I tend to be a pretty serious person, but I do like to laugh, and so I brought a couple of things that I hope will help with some laughter here. One, I don't know how well you can see this from back in the room. So one of the treasures I got at the art fair one year. And this lady is laughing, and I hope you can see how she is just letting go with laughter. And I always see her sitting in a circle of friends, sharing each other's joys and struggles, and always finding ways to use laughter to uplift and encourage each other. When I sing to a hospice patient, which I do every week, and I did on Friday, the one on Friday might not be able to speak much, and she couldn't, but it's just amazing, and I actually can watch her, the part of her mind kind of click in that remembers music, and music comes from a different place than language in the brain. So I can sing, she'll be coming around the mountain, and she'll click in and start singing along, even though she can hardly speak. And oh my gosh, it's just so joyful, and I feel so much love and so grateful for that experience. So, laughing lady. And you may have been wondering about my avocado here. I found this at a truck stop when we were getting ready to go camping, and it's like, I need this. I walked away, I went out to the car, I went back in and paid the $4.99 or whatever it was to buy this. And I see somebody in the back who really wants to play with it, and I hope I can I'm worried that I can't throw far enough, so I'm going to throw it to Randall instead. I don't want to hit anybody. It will not hurt you, and please feel free to play with it for the rest of the talk. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, it's just a fun thing. Yep. All right. So while you all find some love and joy in my avocado toy, I'm going to switch over to a couple of ending things, which are, of course, a little more serious. This one is called End of Life - Hope. Some of you, like me, are feeling closer to the final years of our lives. I see people in their 80s who are robust and vigorous, and I see people, when I go to sing at facilities, who are younger than I am and can't get out of bed anymore. How to find love in whatever awaits us. Go to Death Cafe and talk about it. That's one thing. But I read this wonderful book called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande, and he says, at least two kinds of courage are required in aging and sickness. The first is the courage to confront the reality of mortality, the courage to seek out the truth of what is to be feared and what is to be hoped. But even more daunting is the second kind of courage, the courage to act on the truth we find. The problem is that the wise course is so frequently unclear. For a long while, I thought this was simply because of uncertainty. When it is hard to know what will happen, it is hard to know what to do. But the challenge I've come to see is more fundamental than that. One has to decide whether one's fears or one's hopes are what should matter most. And where's the love? Obviously in the hope. So I'd like to end with a personal story. As I alluded to earlier, I've learned from my mother what she called love was what I learned from her wasn't love, not even close. The trauma of that time sometimes shows up and takes over in a way that makes me believe it's the truth, and everything else I've learned is a lie. But eventually, with help from truly loving people and everything I've learned from my decades-long spiritual journey, authentic love breaks through. It doesn't have any ulterior motives. It's not trying to get me to be anything other than what I am. Then I can imagine a truly loving mother who can hold and rock and play with the terrified children that live inside of me. And for this I am truly grateful. Love has been just an amazing journey, and I am so glad that I was given the chance to share some of my ideas about love with you. Thank you. And so it is.